like to begin?
Thank you. This is the December 15th, 2020 meeting of the City of Charleston Board of Zoning Appeals Zoning. Present are Mr. Morrison, Mr. Udine, Ms. Grass, Ms. Richards, Ms. Vargas, Mr. Bennett, and Mr. Robinson. Present from the planning staff are Mr. Batchelder, Ms. Ashby, and Ms. Stepp. These proceedings are being recorded, and we ask that those who speak identify themselves for the record. We will conduct this meeting in usual fashion. We will first receive information from city staff about the application and their recommendation. If the recommendation is favorable and no one objects to the application, usually the Board of Zoning Appeals treats the matter as being uncontested and passes it as a matter of course. If, however, the city recommends against the application or there is opposition to the application, we treat the application as contested and hear from the applicant and anyone else who is in favor of the application. Next, we hear from anyone opposed, followed by a short rebuttal from the applicant. We then close the public hearing portion of the meeting for that particular application and open discussion to the Board of Zoning Appeals members only. We'll then make a decision to approve with conditions, or deny the application. The Board of Zoning Appeals Zoning has the authority to do three things. First, to hear appeals to decisions of the zoning administrator. Second, grant special exceptions, a fact-finding function of the board. And third, to grant variances to the zoning ordinance if the application meets the hardship test outlined in section 54-924 of the ordinance. The board may deliberate and make a final decision on a matter by a majority vote of the members present at the hearing and qualified to vote, provided that not less than a quorum is present and qualified to vote. However, an affirmative vote of 2/3 of the board members present and voting shall be required before a use variance may be granted. For a variance to be granted, the Board of Zoning Appeals must make the following findings. A, that there are extraordinary and exceptional conditions pertaining to the particular piece of property. B, these conditions do not generally apply to other property in the vicinity. C, because of these conditions, the application of the ordinance to the particular piece of property would effectively prohibit or unreasonably restrict the utilization of the property. And D, the authorization of a variance will not be of substantial detriment to adjacent property or to the public good, and the character of the district will not be harmed by the granting of the variance. I understand there are no deferrals or withdrawals from tonight's agenda.
That is correct. That is correct, Mr. Robinson.
In that case, the first item on the agenda is A1, 259 St. Phillips Street. Here, special exception under section 54-5-1 to allow construction of a single-family residence on a lot of insufficient size. Lot area 2132 square feet, 2,500 square feet required. Request a variance from section 54-301 to allow construction of a single-family residence with a 0.5 foot north side setback, 3 feet required, zone GB. Mr. Batchelder.
Yeah, just to mention, I forgot to notice this when I was putting the slides together, but the zoning shows on the screen is DR2F, but it's actually GB.
Oh, so sorry.
That's okay. And it's correct on the agenda. It's just
On the screen.
typo there. But the property in question here is located at the southwest corner of St. Phillips Street and Line Street in the Cannonboro-Elliottboro neighborhood. It's just west of King Street. And here's an aerial view showing the lot and Line Street running here. Let me turn on my laser pointer. Go. So Line Street, you see right here, St. Phillips Street right here. And moving on, here's a zoning map. So you see that general business is the zoning for all properties that front on St. Phillips in that area. And Line Street in that immediate area. And that GB zoning extends all the way over to King Street and further east. So this is a area with a mixture of uses, lots of residential units, some other non-residential uses as well, because of the commercial zoning that is allowed. In this case, the applicant is requesting your approval to build a single family residence on this lot. Now, it's zoned commercially, so it is entitled to a conversion of that residential unit to a commercial short-term rental unit, but it's also basically a dwelling unit that can be used that way, but not necessarily doesn't have to be. But they're proposing to build a house on this vacant lot, and in order to do that, they need the special exception because the lot does not meet the minimum lot size for a single family residence. And they need a variance to shift the house over to the north side property line along Line Street. And you'll see that in a minute. Again, here's a view of the property in question right here. And I should point out also on this aerial view that you see a lot of other houses in this immediate area. And those are on lots of a similar size. As you can see, I'm moving the cursor around. This is a house over here on a lot that's probably smaller, right next door on Line Street, 79 Line Street. This is a residential property that is a very small lot, and other lots of similar size that have residential uses on them, although they're zoned commercially. This is a site plan that shows the lot in question on the left and then the proposed site plan right here. Now I'm going to skip to the next slide, which is a blow up of the slide on the left, of the image on the left, to explain this. So we have St. Phillips Street here running along the bottom of the screen, Line Street on the right side of this plan. And this shows the setback lines that are that the zoning ordinance requires. So there's no front setback requirement for the house. There's a 3-foot side setback along the north side property line and a 7-foot side setback required on the south side. And then there's a 3-foot rear setback. The rear setback certainly makes sense given that there's a house on the next lot over the south side property line. That's in keeping with the pattern of development where you have single houses or homes that are sited close, if not on the north side property line, and have a larger side yard on the south side. So this is the way our zoning works. And what this triangle shows is what we call a vision clearance triangle. When you have a corner property located at the intersection of two streets, the zoning ordinance says that you can't build anything between a height of 3 feet and I think 10 feet within the vision clearance triangle. It's a triangle that measures 15 feet on each leg, and then you connect those 2 points, and that becomes an area where visual obstructions for drivers approaching the intersection are to be avoided or prohibited. And so the applicant was scheduled to be heard 2 weeks ago, but deferred this request because they were still not resolved with our Department of Traffic and Transportation department as to what they could and couldn't do within that encroachment vision and clearance triangle. So they've since resolved that issue, and I'll go over that in just a second. But the other thing I'll point out is that certainly if you were to set back the house along the north side property line along Line Street, you would essentially be creating a 3-foot strip of land adjacent to the sidewalk that would be, I guess you could plant things in it, but it's really not very useful to have that 3-foot strip right there adjacent to the sidewalk. And so more typically, buildings are sited right up on the side property line if they're on a corner. And here you have a proposed site plan showing the house that meets the rear setback requirements, it meets the south side setback requirements. However, it proposes to align the house along that north side property line within that 3-foot setback area. So that's the variance that's listed on your on the agenda. And then the second request is to allow this single family residence to be constructed on a lot of insufficient size. And as I pointed out, the lot in question, 259 St. Phillips Street, is comparable in size to other lots in the immediate area that do have single family homes on them. So not unusual. And these are the floor plans showing ground floor living space, a bedroom, 2 bedrooms, or actually ground floor living space. On the first floor, bedrooms above, and then 3rd floor has another bedroom and kitchen area actually. So, and moving on, this is the design. So this is a proposal, and I should go back to that site plan, floor plan. So what's happening here is that this is outside space. This is covered outside space on the ground floor with columns at these 3 locations right here, so that visually somebody can still look through there and see oncoming traffic on Line Street. That's the purpose of that, and that proposal went before the Department of Traffic and Transportation staff, and they found that to be acceptable. So that resolves that vision clearance triangle issue as far as the city is concerned. These are the floor plans. Here's that open area with the front door right here. And then we get to the elevations right here, showing the proposed design of the house, which will require the approval of the Board of Architectural Review before it can be built. And so the design may change. It may, I'm sure it'll get more detailed and evolve, but that is the proposal. And then if I go forward, so these are just some views of the surrounding area. And here's a larger view of the actual corner property. It's been used as a surface parking lot for a number of years, and not a very attractive use, so a house would be a much nicer use of the property. And again, the lot of insufficient size gives the board the authority to approve a site plan deemed not in conflict with the intent and purposes of the ordinance. And and then the applicant submitted with their application the information about how they feel that they meet the variance test. And we agree with their findings here that the intent is to locate the residence along that north side property line abutting the street, so there's no setback. That's the preferred option. And in fact, in this case, they went to the neighborhood association and they have a letter from them indicating that they support this request, and that is from Andrew Gould of the Neighborhood Association. So I think that concludes my presentation. Our recommendation is for approval. We feel that they meet the special exception requirement for the lot of insufficient size and the variance requirements to place this house adjacent to that north side property line. And we recommend approval, and so that's our recommendation. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
The staff recommends approval. Mr. Batchel and Ms. Ashby, is anyone present who's in opposition?
No, Mr. Robinson, no one that has signed up.
There is no opposition. The city staff recommends approval. Any questions for the staff or any motions?
I was just curious, historically, what was on that piece of property? I'm just curious.
We can admit the applicant, and they might know that, but I don't know.
It's
if you'd
okay.
like.
I'm just curious.
Okay.
I can look it up.
Any other questions, any motions?
Move approval.
I'll second it.
It's moved and seconded. Ms. Ashby, did you get the second?
Please repeat the second motion. Thank you, Mr. Robinson.
I seconded it.
Thank you, Ms. Grass.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Mr. Morrison,
Aye.
Mr. Judon,
Aye.
Ms. Grass,
Aye.
Ms. Richards,
Aye.
Ms. Vargas. Ms. Vargas,
Aye. You can't hear me.
Mr. Bennett,
Aye.
and Mr. Robinson, aye. It's unanimously approved. Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is item B17 Calhoun Street. Request a third one-year extension of a vested right pursuant to section 54-962 to extend the approval to December 31st, 2021. Vested right pertains to a special exception granted under section 54-220 on December 4th, 2007 for a 100-unit accommodations use in the MU2 mixed-use zone district. Mr. Batchelder.
So the applicant is requesting another extension to this vested right that was approved originally a number of years ago. And as I've mentioned before, the law allows a vested right to be extended up to 5 times, provided there's been no change in the ordinances that would preclude or prohibit the proposed use, and that is not the case here. The use is still allowed. This is a property that's within the accommodations overlay zone. It's actually, the property lines have changed a little bit over the years, but it's actually this piece right here, which is owned by the same people that own this piece, the neighboring piece right here. And that piece on the corner of Calhoun and Concord Street is 7 Calhoun Street. And the approval was originally for a 100-room inn. So nothing has changed that would prohibit that use from being built today if they wanted to move forward with that project. And we recommend the approval of the vested right, the extension of the vested right to carry it through December 31st of 2021.
The city recommends approval. Ms. Ashby, is anyone present who disagrees with the city's position?
No, Mr. Robinson, no one is present.
Does the board have any questions for city staff, or are there any motions?
I'll move for approval.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Mr. Morrison,
Aye.
Mr. Judon,
Aye.
Ms. Grass,
Aye.
Ms. Richards,
Aye.
Ms. Vargas,
Aye.
Mr. Bennett,
Aye.
Mr. Robinson votes aye. The motion is unanimously approved. Thank you very much. Third item on the agenda is item B2, 15 Broad Street. Request a third one-year extension of a vested right pursuant to section 54-962 to extend the approval to December 31st, 2021. Vested right pertains to a variance granted under section 54-301 on June 21st, 2011 to allow 3 dwelling units with a condition the ground floor can't have any residential use in a limited business zone district. Mr. Batchelder.
15 Broad Street is a property that's zoned limited business, like other properties along Broad Street in that area. It was originally approved back in 2011 for this 3 dwelling units. And extensions have been granted since then. Here's the zoning map showing the location of the property. It sits opposite where State Street intersects with Broad Street. This is a view of the building. Work began on the building, but has never been actually completed, as I understand it. And now there is a new buyer that I think has come along that might take on this project. But you can see it's a 4-story building. And so the approval was to have, to allow up to 3 residential units on the upper floors, but not allow any residential use on the ground floor. We want to keep that as a commercial use, office use, whatever, to maintain the character of Broad Street in that area. So again, the extension is being requested to extend this approval through 2021 until December 31st, 2021. And there have been no changes to the zoning regulations that would prohibit or preclude this use. So we recommend approval of the extension.
Staff recommends approval. Ms. Ashby, is anyone present who disagrees with the city's position?
No, Mr. Robinson, no one is present.
All those in favor signify, any questions, any motions?
I move
Move for
approval.
approval.
Who was first? Mr.
I'll
Judon?
second it.
Mr. John seconds. Ms. Richards, was that you?
Yes. Yes.
Good. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Mr. Morrison,
Aye.
Mr. Judon,
Aye.
Ms. Grass,
Aye.
Ms. Richards,
Aye.
Ms. Vargas,
Aye.
Mr. Bennett.
Aye.
Mr. Robinson votes aye. The motion is unanimously approved. Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is B3, 31 Noonan Street. Request special exception under 54-110 to allow a vertical extension, dormer addition, to a non-conforming building footprint that does not meet the required 3-foot east side setback. Request a variance from section 54-301 to allow a stair addition with a 2-foot west side setback, 7 feet required, zone DR2F. Mr. Batchelder.
31 Noonan Street is a residential property in the West Side neighborhood, located just west of Ashley Avenue. And the property, as you can see, is similar in size to the other properties on Noonan Street. Here's a zoning map, and you see the existing building on Noonan Street and the existing residential buildings on the other streets on Noonan Street in that area. And the applicant is requesting these approvals to allow him to elevate this one-story house to meet the flood zone requirements, which are pretty significant in this area. So in doing that, they are not going to change the footprint of the building except to add stairs to access the elevated one-story house. And they also want to make changes to the back portion of the residential property right here. So the original house is the front portion, and then there was an addition back here, and I think they are proposing to essentially rebuild that addition in the same footprint, but make some modifications to enlarge the living space. Here's a view of the house from the street. Existing site plan. This line right here is the lot line. So it's and you can see that the house sits right up on the east side property line right now. So there's virtually no setback on that side of the property. This is the proposed site plan. The footprint doesn't change except with the addition of the stairs right here. And these stairs are what require the variance to allow the stairs with a 2-foot west side setback. The setback over here right now is already, I think, just a little over 4 feet. So, so that stair addition will end up reducing the setback in that immediate area around those stairs, but other than that, it will remain the same. And then interior floor plan. What is being added is a loft area. You see the stairs right here. So in the back, there's a loft for an additional bedroom space up here. And that space is proposed to have a dormer. So you can see the top elevation is the proposed elevation once the house is raised. And this taller rear portion of the house is proposed to have that loft space. And this the dormer on this side, but also the dormer on the east side right here. And it's those dormers that require the special exception. And the most affected neighbor in this case is the neighbor to the east, who would abut the east elevation of this house and have that dormer looking into their yard. And that neighbor has written a letter dated November 15th to Drew Harrison, the applicant. And he says, this letter is to inform you and whomever it may concern that as your neighbor, I've reviewed your plans and give you my full approval to renovate your property as described within those plans, including adding a dormer on the east side overlooking my house. Please feel free to reach out to me at any time for questions or concerns. At the above contact information, we're excited to have you in the neighborhood. Chauncey Jordan. And so the most affected neighbor for this dormer addition is saying that they're fine with this, and therefore we feel that it meets the special exception requirements of the zoning ordinance. And I think I put those in there, but these are up close views of the existing house. And there. This is the zoning ordinance standard for an extension of a non-conforming building footprint. And I believe that they meet the requirements. That's limited to extending or increasing the non-conforming use in existence and would not result in an unreasonable intensification of the non-conforming use based on the standards that you have to apply to this, which mainly in this case would deal with light and air impacts. So our recommendation for this request is for approval.
Staff recommends approval. Ms. Ashby, is anyone present in opposition?
No, Mr. Robinson, no one is present.
Are there any questions from the board or any motions?
I have one question. Lee, I just have a question about the overall impact of the flooding as it relates to these types of applications. So raising these houses, is that just something that in the foreseeable future is going to have to happen? And do you feel, or is it any sort of concern as to what that does to the other houses that in the area that aren't raised? I'm just curious about how that works. So this, on this street, this one house will be raised and the rest of them aren't?
Well, it's going to happen more and more often.
Right.
The one thing that I can say is that usually, you know, if you were an owner and you were thinking about raising your house to avoid the problems of flooding, might raise it a few feet.
Right.
But the cost of doing that is such that that you get into this situation where you're spending more than 50% of the value of the existing building, plus you're making other renovations to it. So you end up passing that 50% threshold, and when you do that, you're required to elevate to meet the FEMA requirement, the flood elevation requirements.
Right.
So it's not just a question of whether somebody wants to do it. Sometimes, many times they have to do it because they're spending enough money that they're exceeding that 50% cap. And then they have to do it to meet the elevation requirements set by the federal government, plus the 2-foot freeboard requirements that the city has added on to that. And actually in this case, the city only requires a 1-foot freeboard for existing structures. New construction is 2 feet, but since this is an existing house, it's 1 additional foot of elevation.
So if they only wanted to raise the house without needing the setback for those stairs, would it even come before this board?
If they didn't need to add stairs and didn't want to add a dormer, then it would not have to come before the board.
Okay. I guess that was my question, just how this.
Yeah, it's the dormers and the stairs.
Gotcha. Thanks.
Yes.
Any other questions, any motions?
Motion to approve.
A second.
Thank you. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Mr. Morrison?
Aye.
Mr. Jadon?
Aye.
Ms. Grass?
Aye.
Ms. Richards?
Aye.
Ms. Vargas?
Aye.
Mr. Bennett?
Aye.
Mr. Robinson votes aye. The motion is unanimously approved. Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is 17.5 Hanover Street. Request a special exception under section 54.110 to allow a horizontal expansion, bath, bedroom, deck, and vertical extension, bath, bedroom, deck, that extends a non-conforming 0-foot north side setback, 3-foot south side setback, and 3-foot total side setback, 3 feet, 7 feet, and 10 feet required. Zone DR2F. Mr. Batchelder.
And I'm going to have Ms. Ashby present this one. She's more familiar with the details of this one, so I've asked her to do that tonight. Kenny?
Yes, sir. Lee, I'm ready for the next slide.
Okay.
Okay. This is a property for you. It's located on the east side of the peninsula in the East Side neighborhood. It is north of Amherst. It's west of Hanover, and above it's south of Columbus Street. Next slide. This is a zoning map with the property highlighted. Next slide. And this is an aerial view of the property. Next slide. Okay. The site plan before you, this is an existing single-family residence that will be renovated for 2 units, a duplex use, per the city's affordable housing program. The city zoning ordinance allows as a conditional use affordable housing on properties to have multiple units that are able to meet the conditions as notated in section 54-207 in the city zoning ordinance. This property meets the conditions for a duplex use based on the lot size, lot occupancy, and parking is not required for a duplex use. I just wanted to emphasize that the duplex use is not an issue before this board. Looking at the site plan, and it may be a little bit hard to read, but we have an existing building, which is a single family residence, and to the rear is proposed a 2-story addition. The horizontal expansion, which is the building becoming larger, is going to provide 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, and a deck. And vertical extension is the same configuration, 2 bedrooms, bathrooms, and a deck. The previous slide showed the demolition, and now we see the existing floor plan with and then the next slide shows that the rear of the house, which will be submitted to the BAR for approval. There is a rear addition currently that exists that is in a condition of disrepair. So the BAR will have to approve that demolition. So the applicant wants to add on to this existing footprint by providing the 2 bedrooms, the 2 baths, and a deck that will convert this existing single family residence to 1 residential unit on 1 floor. And on the 2nd floor, it will be the 2nd residential unit. Again, the issue of the 2 units is not the issue. Next slide. These are the elevations of the proposed addition. The front elevation, the left, the right, and the rear. And you can see the deck as it is shown on the ground level and on the 2nd level. Next slide. The issue before you tonight is based on section 54-110. The expansion of this building to provide a little more heated space, which is the rear 2-story addition that extends the existing side setbacks on the north and south side, is governed by section 54-110. Being that this building is increasing in size, this becomes an issue of intensification. This section governs any nonconformity. And the nonconformity regarding this particular property is the building's footprint. This building is non-conforming because it encroaches into the setbacks. So any addition proposed has to be reviewed and approved by this board. Staff does not feel that having a slightly larger building will result in an unreasonable intensification. That will be an adverse intensification that would restrict light and airflow onto the adjacent properties, or noise or fumes, and parking is not an issue. I believe that the PowerPoint shows two views of this house from the street. Mr. Batchelder,
Oh,
the photographs.
this one?
Okay, that's fine. There is a house that is to the south of this property, referenced as 17 Hanover. This house actually sits further back from the front property line. And it also does not sit on, which would be the north side setback. Yes, that's the house in question. There's a fence line between 17 and 17 and a half Hanover. 17 Hanover, which is a house that is set back from the front street, is not right on the property line. The subject lot, 17 and a half Hanover, does have a setback from that south side property line. It is not conforming, but it is at least 3 feet. Mr. Batchelder, will you please go back to the site plan?
Oh. Right here.
Site plan, yes. I know it's a little hard to read, but if the bottom left-hand corner, I believe you can see what I just mentioned with 17 Hanover setting back from the front property line and also not right on, which would be their north side property line. 19 Hanover Street is to the north. It is looking at the photo, it would be the property to the right. And this property is currently a duplex. The use on this lot was approved by the Board of Zoning Appeals zoning actually back in April of 2003. This property is owned by the Ebenezer AME Church that has provided affordable housing on lots that they own in this community. Mr. Batchelder, will you please go back to the section that governs 54207?
207?
Sorry.
110?
Yes, the affordable housing ordinance.
Oh, I don't have that.
Oh, section 541110, forgive me, please.
There we go.
Yes, reading what has to be considered per this section 54-110, in considering the reasonableness of the intensification of the extension or increase, the board shall consider the effect of the extension or increase on properties in the vicinity to include traffic impacts, vehicular and pedestrian safety, parking impacts, potential impacts of noise, lighting, fumes, or obstruction of airflow or light onto adjoining property, and also impacts on the aesthetic character of the environs. I wanted to make reference to that section because number one, we have an existing single family residence that it is 2 stories. The proposed addition is 2 stories. So that is not an intensification, which would be an adverse effect onto the adjacent property, which is to the south, 17 Hanover Street, which is also a 2-story structure. Since there is that separation between the 2 structures, the impact of noise and lighting and fumes and airflow is not something that the proposed addition would result in an adverse intensification. The property that is to the north of 17 and a half Hanover, 19 Hanover, is already a multifamily use, and it is a two-story structure. Again, the intensification of the lighting and noise and fumes and obstruction of air will not adversely affect that property because that structure actually is not right on that, which would be their south side property line. Staff feels that the intensification of the size of this building is not an adverse intensification, and the impact of the addition onto adjacent properties will not be adversely affected, and the character of the district will not be harmed by allowing the proposed addition to create 2 units duplex for affordable housing in this neighborhood. As a additional statement to our recommendation, this neighborhood is a mixture of single-family residential housing stock, multifamily housing stock, and churches. In fact, within this block between Amherst and Columbus and Hanover, you have all of those uses right there in that block. So the impact of an adverse intensification onto the character of this neighborhood, we do not feel is an adverse intensification. In fact, we feel it lends to the character of this neighborhood, of this section, of this block of homes, because the existing use as a residential use does not change. It is still a residential use as a duplex, and multifamily, single-family housing stock, and churches are an historical and frequent core habitation in these neighborhoods on the peninsula. Staff's recommendation is for approval, and I do have letters of support, I do have letters of non-support, and I do have a letter of concern.
Staff recommends approval. Ms. Ashby, is anyone present at this hearing that is in opposition?
I believe so, Mr. Robinson. We were trying to get the representative from our Department of Housing and Community Development, Mr. Eddie Bynes, and I know he was having trouble signing into the meeting. Mr. Batchelder, do you see where Mr. Bynes has been successful?
I see him and I see the applicant, so let's.
Yes, the applicant is here as well.
Let's promote the applicant. Who should I
Yes.
promote?
The applicant is here as well as the owner.
And who should I promote?
I think we can promote Mr. Bynes first as to the
Mr.
affordable
who?
housing issue.
Who was that? Who did
Eddie
you-
Bynes.
Well, why don't we have the applicant? I'm gonna
Okay.
promote the applicant and then I'll
Okay,
give him a chance to. That's Mr. Gettings, right?
yes, sir, it is.
And I also see a Lowndes,
That is the owner.
so I'll promote them too.
Okay, thank you.
So I've done that. Any other applicant people? Those are the two.
I am not aware of anyone else other than those 3 individuals.
Okay, so Mr. Gettings, is there anything that you want to say on behalf of your application or your client? You can unmute yourself if you want to speak.
that helps a lot. Thank you and good evening, everyone.
And if there is anything that you'd like to say, I guess the chair or I can swear you in.
Please do the honors, Mr. Batchelder.
Okay, Mr. Gettings, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, certainly do. Good evening, good afternoon, everyone. This project is an interesting project in the sense that the existing building, the house, very, very old house built in 1915, but it has suffered several renovations over the years. And the condition of the house now is in very poor condition. As you can see, there is some dilapidation and wall, the rear left wall is beginning to, well, has been falling away from the building, and now the owner has put a tarp over it to protect the water from getting into the building. It's in the need for a restoration that brings it back to being closer to the character of this type of home. And I think this project is a good project to do it. We are intent on honoring the architectural character of the neighborhood and with our proposed design, and also modernize the property appearance a bit. The floor plans are made so that you can have various accommodations of affordable housing, tenants that meet that income level. And if you can envision single parent families, the need for the second bedroom is very important, so that you could have a parent bedroom and a child bedroom that has to be separated under this program if they're opposite sexes. That's it. I think the project, I think we've really worked to try to satisfy some of the community's concerns. And I've been in communication with several of the community leaders, Ms. LaToya Gamble in particular, and I believe Chris Diamatha indicated some support for the project, and another neighbor that I know of is in support, Lavanza Breland. He and his mother submitted a letter of support. I'm willing to answer any questions you have, but that's my presentation.
Any questions for Mr. Gettings? Is there anyone else present who wishes to speak on behalf of the application?
And so I know Eddie Bynes is signed in, so I'm going to I'm going to unmute him. So
Mr.
Mr.
Bynes is present.
Mr. Bynes? You'll unmute yourself. You'll be able to speak. Tell you what, I'm gonna.
Okay, good evening, everyone. I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes, and I'm gonna have to swear you in first. Are you ready?
No, 1 second. It's been a trip. Okay.
Mr. Bynes,
Okay.
do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Go right ahead, Mr. Bynes.
Okay, good evening, everybody. My name is Eddie Bynes. I'm the housing manager for the City of Charleston Department of Housing and Community Development. We were approached by the owner to provide, if possible, assistance to help the family in restoring this house, this particular house, because it's a family dwelling, has been in their family for quite some time. And his words to me was that they wanted to preserve this house in this neighborhood because, number one, he grew up in this house with his grandmother. His grandmother raised him, and he wanted to leave a legacy for her and his family. Now, what we do, the assistance that we provide is to provide a stipend to assist with the cost of construction of this house, of this particular house. And we provide and we secure it. We do provide a note and mortgage to secure the property so that it will indeed serve the residents that the Department of Housing and Urban Development approves. In other words, it's funded by HUD. The idea here is to provide assistance to help families in that neighborhood. And so in this particular case, what we will do is we will have a covenant. We have a note and mortgage. We call it note and mortgage for this particular program. It is being supported by the Community Development Block Grant Program. And the way that works is we provide the money and some funds of subsidy. In this particular case, we will be providing $20,000 per unit for the house. If and in this particular instance, the owner is looking to at least provide one house that will serve particularly low and moderate income people. Guidelines for doing that are provided by HUD, and we have to adhere to that. Now, if and by the way, it's a subsidy, and so there are no payments on it. However, if the owner defaults in the terms and condition of the note and mortgage, then we would call him and we'd have to take actions against him, legal action, and he would have to pay the money back that we put in the project. We have to satisfy this with HUD. Once we approve one of these projects, they want to see it done in a timely manner so that housing can be available to assist families who need housing. Right now, the unit is vacant. And so we have to abide by the terms and conditions that are laid out by the Department of Housing and Urban Development. Our staff will monitor this project from beginning to end. Once it is approved, we have a construction team that goes out and actually monitors the work, make sure it's being done accordingly. I believe there may have been some concern about who is going to reside in the house. And so I want to just reiterate and emphasize that it's going to be for families. It's going to be working class, working type individuals. Would also add that I spoke at length today with the pastor of which is Reverend, what is his last name? Rivers, yeah, I'm sorry. And who is the pastor of what used to be known as St. John's Mission, now it's St. Matthew's Church, I believe is the correct name. And I talked to him at length, and he understood and is supportive of this project because he understands what we're trying to do with creating housing for people that need housing. And it's not for, and one other thing that I should point out to you, Mr. Chairman, and everybody else that's listening is, this house, these units, the focus is on the income of the persons who live in the house. And it's just fortunate that we have a young man that is coming back into the neighborhood, and he's coming back into this area to renovate a house that he grew up in. And he has pledged to let folks live in the house who meet the criteria that have been established by the Department of Housing and Urban Development. We, and the applicable term for us is serving families, not in individual, but families. And I'll answer any other question that you may have, Mr. Chairman, and other members of this that is on this line. Are there any questions?
Any questions, Mr. Vines? Is there anyone else that wishes to speak on behalf of the application?
Penny, do you know, is there anybody else signed up to speak on behalf?
Yes, sir. The owner of the property, Mr. Lowndes, he had registered to speak. Vernon Lowndes.
Okay, so he has the opportunity to unmute himself if he would like to speak.
You may have to give him a minute because I know it was a task.
And he's unmuted now, so if he can hear me.
Let me try to call him. Okay, let's see here.
I think he's having some problems.
Can everybody hear me?
Mr. Lowndes, we can't really understand you.
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Not very good.
Can you hear us?
Yes, I could hear that.
I put it back on.
Okay. Are you there? I heard that. Maybe, was there anybody else, Penny, that wanted to speak in favor of this?
No, Mr. Batchelder, I just have the letters of support and non-support that I just wanted to make a part of the record.
Would you like to put those in for now, Penny, please?
Yes, sir. We have a letter of support from the East Side Community Development Corporation, signed by the neighborhood president for the East Side Neighborhood Association, LaTanya Gamble. And I'll just summarize what she has said, written in this letter, that the East Side Community Development Corporation and most of the community is in support of 17 Hanover Street Affordable House Project. The applicant is providing 2 affordable housing units, and she makes reference to at least 1 on-premise parking. Since she has written this letter, I corrected her in that regard. However, She has put that into this letter because of the concerns of all of the residents that may not quite understand the conditions and provisions in our zoning ordinance. So she has also stated that while we are concerned about parking in the community, we have visited the location at various times and found parking not to be an issue. And we have forwarded all concerns from the neighbors to the applicant, and that information was provided to Mr. Lowndes. They also mentioned in the letter that they have spoken to Gianna Shaw Johnson and Mr. Geddes and Mr. Lowndes. And they also expressed that, you know, the historical value of the house is important, but at the end of the day, they welcome the opportunity to have another affordable house being renovated for families to stay in the community. And we thank you for your consideration. She has signed it, and other members of that committee: LaTanya Gamble, Eastside CDC President; Sheila Fields, Cathedra Cross Miller; Vernon Drayton, Taika Grant, Edward Jones, Reverend Bernard Judge, Derek Milligan, Deborah Powell Anderson, and Ruby Randall. So that is support from the East Side Neighborhood Association. We also have a letter from a Mr. and Mrs. Myers. This is the property that is to the south of 17 and a half Hanover. At 17 Hanover is the residence. Good afternoon. My husband and I are in total support of the proposed project being built at 17 and a half Hanover. Then we also have a letter of support from Mr. Lavanza Breland. He and his mother have property that they own on the east side at 35 Reed Street. They're in support. Then we have another letter of support from Mr. Chris DiMaccia, who's also an owner in the East Side neighborhood, and he has sent his letter of support. We have another letter of support from a resident at 25 Hanover Street, giving support to Vernon Lowndes and his project at 17 and a half Hanover Street. And she makes reference that she has known the Lowndes family and his parents for over 40 years, and she's very happy for him trying to keep his family legacy going in the community. Now, those are the letters of support. We also have letters of non-support that you will please indulge me for a moment. We have a letter from Stacy Barrington, who lives at 59 Amherst. Her letter is rather long, but in summary, she just talks about the house being too large, and she does not want there to be a destruction of historical buildings and the historic fabric of the community. And she does make reference to the parking, that there is no parking on the lot. And that is from Stacy Barrington at 59 Amherst. We have another letter of non-support from Amy Brown, who resides at 8 Hanover Street. She echoes Miss Barrington and the same concerns about the house not losing its historic fabric, and there is not enough parking in the community, and the concern about people living in the home that may not adhere to the values of the community and create noise because of the 2 decks being constructed to the rear of the property. I believe. And lastly, we have a letter from a Mr. Tim Kuzmar, who lives at 51 America Street. Again, he's echoing the same concerns that Ms. Barrington and Ms. Brown stated. Lastly, I do have an email. It's an email of concern, and I just want to read it into the record. This is one of the residents that actually live, I believe, maybe in that building to the north of 17 and a half Hanover, which would be 19 Hanover, Miss Erica Peeler. Her concerns were she wanted to know what the construction hours would be and what the mask requirements would be. Thank you very much. Those are my communications.
Thank you, Ms. Ashby. Is Mr. Lowndes available yet? Mr. Batchel, I think we ought to.
Yes, sir.
Oh,
Mr. Lowndes is available?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm okay. So you can hear me now?
Yeah.
yeah.
One moment, please, Mr. Lowndes.
Okay.
Mr. Batchel?
Mr. Lowndes, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Proceed, Mr. Lowndes.
Yes, sir. My name is Vernon Lowndes, and I am the owner of the property located at 17 and a half Hanover Street. Yes, I did reach out to the city of Charleston for some assistance due to the fact that the property management just got too overwhelming for me. I was trying to do it on my own, but I just couldn't. After talking with Mr. Bynes, the renovation program seemed to be the way to go for me, especially if it was going to help families in the neighborhood or in the community. So we came to a conclusion that yes, that's what I'd like to do, because it would provide, the city would provide assistance for me in getting this property back up to standards. So this is why I joined the program, just to help the community out and to provide some affordable housing for families in need.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Mr. Lowndes? Is there anyone else in favor of wishing to speak in favor of the application?
Mr. Robinson, I'm not aware of anyone else regarding this application.
In opposition, does anyone wish to speak in opposition to the application?
Has anyone signed up, Penny?
No, sir. What I read into the record, that's the information that I have.
Okay.
Are there any questions from the board or any motions?
I have one question for staff. Ms. Ashby, you mentioned that a resident at 19 Hanover had a concern, but did you hear from the property owner?
I believe if Mr. Lowndes is still on the call, he may be able to better address that question. Ms. Grass.
Okay.
Mr. Lowndes, could you answer the question? Did you hear it?
Yes, sir. I did hear the question. I was not contacted by the property owner at 19 Hanover with any concerns to my project.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes, ma'am.
Motions?
Motion to approve.
I'd like to second it.
Moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye. Mr. Morrison?
Aye.
Mr. Dudon?
Aye.
Ms. Grass?
Aye.
Ms. Richards?
Aye.
Ms. Vargas?
Aye.
Mr. Bennett?
Aye.
Mr. Robinson votes aye. The motion is unanimously approved. Thank you very much and good luck. The next item on the agenda is 7 State Street.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. 7 State Street, request variance from section 54-301 to allow 2 residential units, first and second floors with 1,364 square feet of lot area per dwelling unit, 3,000 square feet required, zone limited business. Mr. Batchelder.
Okay. Okay, so moving on, I had to move everybody back to an attendee. 7 State Street. So 7 State is a commercially zoned property, zone limited business. It's just north of Broad Street. It actually it's just north of the People's Building property at Broad and State Street. Has a 2-story building on it. And you can see on this zoning map, it's a little bit hard, but limited business extends along Broad Street. And it includes this one property on the west side of State Street. Beyond that, all of the properties are zoned residential, although there are commercial uses in some of these properties. Actually, most of the properties on the in this block of State Street on that west side have some commercial uses in them. And then on the east side of State Street, you see that the limited business zoning extends further north all the way up to where Chalmers intersects State, 1 block off Broad. So that is the zoning map. And the request is to allow this property, which has, as you can see here, a 2-story building on it, to allow that property to have 2 residential units. 1 unit is fine. They could have 1 unit occupying both floors, but they would like to have 2 residential units, 1 on the ground floor and 1 on the second floor. And they have reached out to a number of other property owners in the immediate area, and as well as the neighborhood association. And we have letters of support from another number of people, and I'll go through those in just a minute. But moving on, these are some old Sanborn maps just showing the location of the property. The building itself, I think, dates to the early 19th century, according to Jonathan Poston's book. Here's an up-close view of the building, beautiful building. And these are photographs that show, number one, you see the main entrance into the ground floor right here. There's also a doorway right here on the side. And that another view of that doorway leading into what is essentially a hallway and staircase to go up to the second floor. These are floor plans existing and proposed. Perhaps, well, I'm not sure, maybe that staircase is not there today, but they can add it back into that space. But you can see that they would take the ground floor, make it living and kitchen up front, 2 bedrooms in the back, and basically the same layout upstairs with a living space and a kitchen in the front, and then 2 bedrooms in the back. So each unit occupies a floor, 2 units total. The lot is only large enough to accommodate 1 unit. In the City of Charleston zoning ordinance, generally speaking, the number of units you can have on a lot, when the lot does allow multiple units, is based on the size of the lot. So the variance is to allow 2 units on a lot that doesn't quite meet the requirements for the lot size. And the letters of support that they have obtained are as follows. So the letter from Susan Bass, the president of the French Quarter Neighborhood Association. I'm going to read these, they're short. As president of the French Quarter Neighborhood Association, I'm writing to let you know that our board has voted to support a zoning variance for 7 State Street, a building owned by Messrs. E. Bart Daniel, Joseph P. Griffith Jr., and Matthew R. Hubble to revert to residential use for the property. As residents of the French Quarter, we always welcome reversions to residential from commercial. We believe that having 2 residential condominiums at this property would be an enhancement to the neighborhood, and we would be in favor of such a zoning variance for 7 State Street. We would also strongly support a single-family residential use. And that's Susan Bass, president of the French Quarter Neighborhood Association. Then I have a letter from Shannon Jones. She writes, I am writing to express my support for the proposed variance regarding 7 State Street. I understand the variance would permit this building to be used as 2 separate residences, which I believe would be consistent with what is already a mix of residential and limited business in this block of the French Quarter. I own 2 properties on 7 State Street, one directly next door to 7 State Street and another just 2 doors down. I would welcome the use of this building as proposed by the current owners. Next letter is from Jerry Theos. Dear sirs, I am writing you to wholeheartedly endorse a zoning variance for 7 State Street, building owned by Messrs. E. Bart Daniel, Joseph P. Griffith Jr., and Matthew R. Hubble, to allow for 2 residential condominiums on this property. I'm the owner of the building located at 11 State Street, which is 2 doors down from the subject building. I believe that having 2 residential condominiums at this property would be an enhancement to the neighborhood, and I would be strongly in favor of such a zoning variance for 7 State Street. I note that it is my understanding that the 7 State Street building was previously used as 2 separate condominiums, and there are still 2 separate entrances to the building visible from the street. Next letter is from Stephen Schmutz. I am writing to express my enthusiastic support of the proposed variance regarding 7 State Street. I understand the variance would permit this building to be used as 2 separate residences, which I believe to be consistent with what is already a mix of residential and limited business in this block of the French Quarter. It is my understanding that there are condominiums, apartments mixed in many of the buildings in this area. I know there are 2 apartments in the building right next to me at 28 Broad Street, and there is a apartment in the commercial building at 3 State Street, which I believe is right next door to 7 State Street. Of course, there is at least 1 condominium in the People's Building, which is the corner of Broad and State Street. I have owned the building at 24 Broad Street since 1989 and is just around the corner from 7 State Street. I would welcome the use of the building as proposed by the current owners, and note that the building still has 2 separate front entrances, downstairs and upstairs, for downstairs and upstairs units, consistent with its previous use. And then from Richard and Susan Ledham, as owners of 2 units, 1 residential, 1 commercial, in the People's Building at 18 Broad Street, we fully support the variance for 7 State Street for 2 residential units. As you are aware, 18 Broad is immediately next door to 7 State Street. We have chosen to make it a residential address and feel a change in the use from commercial to residential at 7 State would enhance the neighborhood for us and other residents of the area. If not mistaken, 7 State at one point in its long existence was used as 1 or more residential units. In a sense, it is a return to its previous and perhaps original use. Regardless, we support the variance. And finally, last letter from Gedney Howe. I'm writing to convey my wholehearted support for the proposed variance regarding the building at 7 State. As I understand it, this variance would allow the building to potentially be used as 2 separate residences, which is consistent with what is already a mix of residential and limited business in this block of the French Quarter. I am the occupier of a small office building at 8 Hanover Street, just around the corner from 7 State. I have no objections to 7 State being used for this residential purposes. I support and welcome the use of the building as proposed by its current owners. So we have letters of support, and I don't believe anybody signed up to speak in opposition. Is that correct, Penny?
That is correct.
So our recommendation is for approval to allow the 2 residential units in this building, and be happy to answer any questions you might have. I know I've got a few of the applicants online. If you have any questions, I believe I can unmute them and you can hear from them directly, but I don't think there's any opposition to this.
Staff recommends approval. There is no opposition. Does the board have any questions, or are there any motions?
I have a facetious question. I don't know why these owners didn't go get Lenny Krawcheck's approval. He's 2 doors down. He could have been a vote swayer.
I can unmute these. I have a few attorneys on the phone.
Appreciate your comments, Mr. Morrison. Could you accompany that with a motion, please?
Yes, I move approval.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Mr. Morrison,
Aye.
Mr. Judon,
Aye.
Ms. Grass,
Aye.
Ms. Richards,
Aye.
Ms. Vargas,
Aye.
Mr. Bennett.
Aye.
Mr. Robinson votes aye. The motion unanimously passes. Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is 38 Queen Street. Request a use variance for section 54203 to allow an art gallery first floor in an SR5 single-family residential zone district. Request special exception under 54.511 to allow 1,150 square feet of gallery area with 1 off-street parking space, 3 spaces required, zone SR5. Mr. Batchelder.
So this does involve a use variance, so a 2/3 vote in favor of the request for a use variance is required. In this case, this is another property in the French Quarter neighborhood. You can see on this map, it's located almost on the corner of Queen and Church Street. And zone residential, this is the zoning map for that area. The yellow color indicates the residential zoning that applies to this area of the neighborhood, and the red to the left is the commercial zoning. And there are, I also, of course, want to point out, there are a lot of commercial or non-residential uses within the yellow area. We have a commercial parking lot over here. Let me just turn this laser pointer on. So we've got commercial parking lot over here. We've got some commercial uses or commercial spaces within some of these buildings. This is an office right here, I believe. And then we've got, of course, the Dock Street Theater is directly across the street right here. We got the Huguenot Church on this corner, St. Phillips Church on this corner, and right here, Graveyard to the north, Footlight Players Theater right over here, So this is a real mix of residential and commercial uses, very compatible commercial or non-residential uses. And here's an image of the building in question. This is 38 Queen Street, the building on the left right here. And the courtyard on the east or west side of that building is part of the property as well. And then you have a small building on the corner, not part of the property. And here's a view of the courtyard. Multiple doorways into the ground floor. The back main door right here would be for a residential unit that would remain on the second floor of the property. And then the doorway right here, these French doors, would be the gallery entrance. And there is a history of this property having this use, this non-residential type of gallery use. And in fact, I can recall when I first moved to Charleston in 1987, I lived adjacent to this courtyard, and there was a gallery on the ground floor of this building back then, and it existed for a number of years, a framing shop, gallery, that sort of thing. And then it became, more recently, it was an office for an interior designer. And so it's had a variety of uses over the years, but there has been a gallery use for a number of years in this building, but not recently. And so that non-conforming use of the property, because of the residential zoning, was lost. And I went back and I even looked at the old Sanborn maps. This is 1888. And the S designation for this building indicates that it was some type of store back then, even probably store on the ground floor and residential unit upstairs. But at least there was a commercial use in the building even back then. So it's got a long history of having non-residential uses in it. And the applicant is requesting the use variance to allow the ground floor to be used as an art gallery space. Primary hours of operation, I believe, as indicated by the applicant, would be Monday through Saturday, 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. with occasional 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. hours. And then upstairs, there would be an apartment, one residential unit. So that is the request. And we have a number of letters of support that I'll be happy to read into the record here. And I'm just going to summarize these. This is a letter from Susan Bass, the president of the French Quarter Neighborhood Association. As president of the French Quarter Neighborhood Association, I'm writing to let you know that our board has voted to support a use variance for 38 Queen Street to allow an art gallery on the ground floor. The applicant, Lee Corrigan, is proposing to purchase the building and operate it as an art gallery on the first floor. Our support of this use variance is conditioned upon the art gallery use only, number one, and operating within the usual 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. hours, with 2 or 3 exceptions to operate until 8 p.m. Then we have a letter from Chisholm Leonard, who writes that that he and his wife had lived at 25 Queen Street, the property on the eastern side of the Huguenot Church, for 27 years, and that he is in support of the applicant bringing her gallery back to Queen Street. And he points out that the property has previously been zoned to support a gallery, and she is just the kind of person and gallery owner that this neighborhood should support. And another letter from Ian Walker, and I know Mr. Walker owns the property immediately to the rear, which are a number of residential rental units. This indicates he wishes her luck with the purchase, and he remembers when it was a gallery and thought it was a shame that it closed. It's nice to see it return as such. And then from Janet Hopkins, who lives at 141 Church Street, right around the corner, and actually abutting this property on the north side. She writes that she generally opposes commercial changes to zoning to the single family homes in the neighborhood. But having lived here at 141 for 32 years, with many more to go, 38 Queen Street was once Nancy's Gallery, as you well know. In fact, I had my first art exhibit there. I know firsthand that Nancy's Gallery had a positive presence in the neighborhood and was a good neighbor to have in these close quarters. So she is in support of this and this request. And then finally, I have a Margaret Bridgeforth of 28 Queen Street writes, writing to express my support for the zoning variance to allow the first floor use of an art gallery at 38 Queen Street. And so those are the letters of support that we have. And as Mrs. Bass pointed out, they want to make sure that the approval is conditioned on this being an art gallery use only, not any other type of commercial use, and that it would operate within normal hours of 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. with 2 or 3 exceptions to operate until 8 p.m. So those are the conditions that we would recommend be attached to any approval from the board, and I don't believe there's any opposition. Is that correct, Penny?
You're correct, Mr. Batchelder. No opposition.
Staff recommends approval, and there is no opposition. Staff recommends approval as specified. Any comments, any questions, any motions from the board?
Are you? I was going to meditate in the front room until 8.
Who's that talking?
6:30. Okay. Yeah.
What was that, Lee?
Oh, I'm not sure where that's coming from, but yeah, I don't know where that's coming from, but anyway.
Well, let's try it again. Staff recommends approval with conditions, and there is no opposition. Any questions or comments or motions from the board?
I move that the motion be accepted with all the conditions.
Is there
A
a second?
I second.
Good. All in favor signify by saying aye. Mr. Morrison,
Aye.
Mr. Judon,
Aye.
Ms. Grass,
Aye.
Ms. Richards,
Aye.
Ms. Vargas,
Aye.
Mr. Bennett,
Aye.
Mr. Robinson votes aye. The motion unanimously is approved. Thank you very much.
Right.
That's it.
That concludes the last meeting for 2020. So thank you all for your service, and I hope you have a wonderful holiday.
Lee,
Yeah,
Yes.
thank you.
there's another good reason for the staff to recommend that change on State Street. All of Matt Hubble and Bart Daniels' clients are accused criminals. And they won't be traipsing in there anymore. It'll be a definite improvement to the neighborhood.
Hal, they haven't been taking business from you, have they?
That's gonna be a vast improvement to the neighborhood.
I'll tell them you said that.
I think we still have guests.
Thank you very much. Have a good Christmas, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Good holiday.
Happy
Thank you.
holidays.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Have a
you.
good Christmas.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks,
Bye.
Dan Penny.
yeah, thank